When you walk into a beautifully designed building, say like a massive echoing art museum, you tend to look up.
Oh yeah, totally. Your eyes are just drawn to it.
Right. You look at the sweeping curves of the ceiling, or I don't know, the way the light hits the marble, and you just think, wow, the architect who made this was an absolute artist.
Yeah, because you feel the emotion of the space immediately. It hits you on this visceral level before you've even had time to really process what you're actually looking at.
Exactly. It's an emotional response. But if you actually go down into the basement of that museum and find the architect's original blueprints for that building, you don't see poetry.
No, not at all.
You don't see sweeping emotional brushstrokes on a canvas. You see math.
Right, you see load-bearing calculations.
Yes. Strict building codes, rigid grids, and exact measurements down to the literal millimeter. And that tension, that massive gap between the emotional artistic surface and the strict mathematical blueprint underneath, that is the biggest misconception in the tech industry today.
It really is. It's huge.
So today we are doing a deep dive into Chapter 04 of a book called Design User Interface. And our mission is to break down the core design concepts for someone just starting their career and prove why UI design is definitely not art.
And it's a conversation that is desperately needed, especially for people who are, just standing at the threshold of this industry.
Right.
There's this mythology surrounding what it means to design digital products, and it ends up acting as a massive gatekeeping mechanism. People actually think they need to be touched by a muse to do this job.
Yeah, that they need to be some sort of visionary painter.
Exactly. And our mission today is to tear down that gate completely. We're going to break down these foundational concepts using Chapter 04, which is titled Design and Art, as our map.
It's the perfect place to start.
It really is.
Yeah.
And hey, if you are listening to this right now and you want to actually master these concepts alongside us, you need this book. Again, it's called Design User Interface.
Highly recommend it. Yeah, and you can find the link, which is https://hype4academy.gumroad.com/LuiBook right in the description. In fact, the absolute easiest way to get it right now is just to scan the QR code. Just open your camera and scan it.
Having that visual reference in front of you is incredibly powerful. But, even if you're just listening on your commute right now, the underlying philosophy we're about to unpack, it's going to completely reframe how you look at every single app on your phone.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's jump right into the central claim of Chapter 04 because, man, it does not pull its punches.
No, it is very direct.
The premise is that there is a perceived equal sign floating around in the cultural consciousness between graphic designer and UI designer.
Right. People use the terms totally interchangeably.
All the time. But the chapter draws a hard line. It says UI design is not art, and the word not is heavily emphasized. So why is making this stark distinction the absolute starting point for a design career?
Because, if you don't make that distinction, you are fundamentally misunderstanding the job you are actually being hired to do.
How so?
Think about the historical role of a graphic designer or a fine artist. An artist is trying to evoke a feeling, make a statement, and very often disrupt the viewer's expectations.
Like provoke a reaction.
Exactly. Art, by its very nature, invites a certain level of chaos and subjectivity. It asks questions. A painting might mean something completely different to you than it does to me, and in the art world, that ambiguity is considered a massive success.
Right, so if I look at a Jackson Pollock painting and I feel this sense of existential dread, and you look at the exact same painting and feel overwhelming joy, Pollock did his job perfectly.
Spot on. But a UI designer, a user interface designer, operates in a completely different paradigm.
Oh.
The reality of UI design is that it is a highly regulated craft. It is not meant to ask questions at all. It is meant to provide immediate, frictionless answers.
Oh, wow, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, if you look at a banking app and feel existential dread because you don't know what a button does,
then the designer has spectacularly failed.
Exactly. You should not be interpreting a banking app. You should just be using it.
Okay, wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. If it's a craft, like a carpenter building a chair rather than a sculptor molding a statue, where does the creativity actually live? Like, are UI designers just mindless drones putting boxes on a screen?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not even close. But the creativity is channeled into problem solving, not self-expression.
Okay.
The framework we get from Chapter 04 gives us this brilliant mental model for this. It explicitly states that user interfaces are not painted with pixels.
Painted with pixels.
Right. Instead, they are a precise visual blueprint for a working product.
A precise visual blueprint. I want to linger on that for a second because going back to our architect analogy, a blueprint cannot afford to be subjective.
Not at all.
When a contractor looks at an architectural plan, there is zero room for interpretation. A door is exactly 36 inches wide. A load-bearing wall is exactly this thick.
And if you introduce artistic chaos into that blueprint, what actually happens?
The plumbing gets routed right into the electrical panel and the whole building catches fire.
Right. It's a disaster. And in the digital space, sure, the stakes might be slightly different. Nobody's burning down. But the requirements for structural integrity is identical.
Yeah.
If we rely on the framework of UI as a blueprint, it demands accuracy. It demands a total rejection of artistic whim. A blueprint doesn't care if a certain shade of neon green reflects your inner turmoil.
Right.
It only cares if that neon green has a high enough contrast ratio against the background color so that a visually impaired user can actually read the text.
Which brings up a really grounded real-world scenario. Let's say a designer wants to be, artistic.
Uh-oh.
And they create this minimalist, abstract checkout screen for an e-commerce app. They remove the traditional loading spinner because they think it's visually cluttered.
Oh, I've seen this happen.
Right. So the user hits submit payment and nothing visually changes on the screen right away.
Because the designer wanted it clean.
Yeah.
So the user assumes the button didn't work.
Exactly. So what do? They smash the button again.
Yeah.
And they've just paid their rent twice.
Yep.
All because the designer prioritized an artistic, minimalist aesthetic over the strict functional rules of providing user feedback.
That is the perfect distillation of why this distinction matters so much.
Yeah.
The UI designer's literal job is to protect the user from that exact scenario.
If you're listening to this right now and you've been terrified to apply for UI jobs or dive into this field because you feel like you can't draw or you aren't quote-unquote artistic enough, let this be your ultimate validation.
Absolutely.
You don't need a muse waking you up in the middle of the night with a grand vision. You need to understand rules. You need to understand systems.
It's incredibly empowering, honestly. It takes all the pressure off.
Yeah, it does.
You aren't staring at a blank canvas waiting for divine inspiration. You are staring at a problem and applying established structural regulations to solve it.
Okay, so if we aren't using a palette of emotions in a canvas, what is actually on our workbench? Like, if UI design isn't painting, what are the tools we are using to draw these blueprints?
Well, a workbench is basically full of mathematical parameters.
Okay.
Chapter 04 breaks down the specific constraints that form the reality of this work. It's things like border radius, font weight, safe areas, minimum heights, padding, margins, hex codes for color, drop shadow coordinates.
Let's actually unpack some of these, because listing them out makes them sound like dense jargon, but they are the literal building blocks of the digital world. Let's start with the safe area. What is that mechanically?
So a safe area is a rigid mathematical boundary dictated by the physical hardware of the device.
Like the phone itself.
Exactly. Think about modern smartphones. They have rounded corners, camera notches dropping down from the top, the little swipe indicators at the bottom.
Like the dynamic island stuff?
Yeah. The safe area is the exact pixel dimension in the center of the screen where you are mathematically guaranteed that your content will not be physically cut off or obstructed by the hardware.
Okay.
It is not an artistic choice to keep text away from the edge. It is a physical hardware constraint.
So if you decide to ignore the safe area because you want your text to bleed beautifully off the edge of the screen like a high-fashion magazine layout,
your user literally can't tap the back button because it's sitting underneath the phone's physical camera lens. It's a broken blueprint.
wow. Okay, how about minimum height? Chapter 04 talks about that.
Yeah, this one is pure anatomy and ergonomics. A minimum height rule exists because humans are interacting with these interfaces using their physical bodies, specifically their thumbs and fingers.
Right, there's actually a scientific principle for this, right? Fitts law.
Exactly, Fitts law. It essentially states that the time required to rapidly move to a target area is a function of the ratio between the distance to the target and the width of the target.
Okay, translate that into plain English for me.
Make the buttons big enough for a human thumb to hit them comfortably without accidentally hitting the button next to them.
Oh, okay. Simple enough.
Yeah. Apple and Google both have strict published guidelines on this. A button needs to be at least 44 to 48 pixels tall. You can't just make a button 2 pixels high because it looks sleek and minimalist.
Because a human finger is roughly 40 pixels wide.
Exactly. If they can't physically tap it, the design has failed, the art doesn't matter.
What about padding? Chapter 04 mentions padding or inner margin. Now, in a painting, negative space is a feeling. It's atmospheric. How does a UI designer view negative space?
In UI design, negative space is a number.
A number.
Yep. Padding is the mathematical distance between the content, like the text inside a button, and the outer edge of that button. It's not a feeling, it's an integer. It is exactly 16 pixels, or 24 pixels.
And usually designers are working on specific grid systems for this, right? Like an 8-point grid where everything is just a multiple of 8.
Precisely. They use an 8-point grid because it scales perfectly across different screen resolutions without leaving those weird half pixels that make edges look blurry on cheaper screens.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. So when a designer's creating space, they aren't just eyeballing it until it feels right. They are mathematically scaling it. 8, 16, 24, 32 pixels.
It's like structural engineering for the eye.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It organizes information and dictates the cognitive load of the user.
Which brings us to a concept from the chapter that I think completely shatters the Hollywood illusion of what design actually looks like day to day.
What are you going to say?
The premise is that the best interfaces are often a result of manually entering the right numbers into boxes instead of artistic strokes on a graphic tablet.
It's a very sobering reality for some people, but honestly, it's a beautiful one for others.
Because when you watch a sci-fi movie, the tech genius is always swiking their hands in the air, pulling holographic windows apart, sketching these complex algorithms on glass with a glowing marker.
Yeah, very cinematic.
But the actual daily reality of being a successful UI designer, you are sitting at a desk looking at a properties panel on the right side of Figma or whatever software you use, and you are literally clicking a box and typing the number 16 instead of 12 to adjust a margin.
You are calibrating a machine.
Yeah.
You are adjusting the X and Y coordinates of a drop shadow. Maybe you're setting the Y-axis to 4 pixels and the blur to 8 pixels.
There's typing numbers.
Right, to create the exact mathematical illusion of depth so the user's brain subconsciously registers that an element can be clicked. It is a highly analytical, highly iterative process of numerical adjustment.
But wait, I really have to push back here.
Go for it.
If we are all just sitting around typing multiples of 8 into a padding box and making sure all our buttons are exactly 48 pixels tall, doesn't that mean every single app is going to look exactly the same? Where does brand identity come in? Where is the joy in actually using the product?
That is a phenomenal question. And the answer is that standardizing the underlying structure actually frees you up to apply brand identity more effectively.
How so?
Think about cars. Almost every car on the road has 4 wheels, a steering wheel on the left or right side, a brake pedal, and a gas pedal.
True.
Those are the rigid constraints of automotive usability.
Right. If you put the brake pedal on the ceiling because it looks cooler, people will crash and die.
Exactly. But within those strict, identical constraints, a Porsche 911 feels entirely different from a Jeep Wrangler.
Oh, I like that.
In UI, the brand identity comes through in the typography choices, the tone of voice in the copywriting, the specific hex codes of the color palette, and the custom iconography.
So the layout is the same, but the vibe is different.
Yes, you apply the brand on top of the structural blueprint. That's what design systems like Google's material design or Apple's human interface guidelines actually are. They are the standardized chassis of the car. You don't reinvent the chassis every time you just design a new interior.
And this completely dismantles another massive myth, which Chapter 04 addresses directly. There is this assumption that to be a UI designer, you need to be a master illustrator.
Right, the idea that you need to be able to sketch a photorealistic horse to build a good weather app.
Exactly. It's absurd when you put it like that.
It's a remarkably persistent myth. Now, look, understanding color theory or composition from an illustration background, that certainly doesn't hurt,
Sure, it's a bonus.
but it is definitively not necessary for UI design. In fact, sometimes relying too heavily on your illustration skills can be a massive detriment.
Really? How?
Well, you might spend 10 hours crafting this beautiful custom illustration for an onboarding screen while completely ignoring the fact that the skip button in the top right corner is entirely illegible.
You missed the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
So, if you're listening, the takeaway here is profound. The framework of Chapter 04 suggests that you can be a highly successful UI designer by just mastering spatial relationships and numerical rules.
Yes.
You can live in the comfort zone of basic, established good practices without ever needing raw, innate drawing talent. Discipline and logic will take you way further than a paintbrush ever could.
Which naturally forces us to ask the inverse question.
What's that?
What happens when a designer actively rejects this discipline?
Right. What happens if they throw away the 8-point grid, They ignore the minimum thumb tap heights, and they decide they're going to turn their interface into a digital art gallery.
Well, Chapter 04 provides a very stark warning about this. It argues that great interface design must be rigid. When a designer is given too much artistic freedom, the design inevitably deviates from the functional specifications.
Let's translate deviates from functional specifications into real-world pain. What does that actually look like for the person holding the phone?
It means cognitive overload. It means the user has to spend valuable mental energy figuring out how to use the tool rather than just using it.
Like trying to figure out how a door handle works.
Exactly. Imagine you open a weather app. You just want to know if you need to grab an umbrella today.
Super simple task.
But the designer decided that standard numbers are boring. So they've represented the temperature using abstract, shifting geometric shapes that change color based on the barometric pressure.
Oh my God, that sounds like a cool installation at the Museum of Modern Art. But as a daily utility, it's a complete disaster.
Right.
I do not want to decode a visual puzzle at 7 a.m. before my coffee. I literally just want to know if it's raining.
Exactly, because the ultimate goal of software is functionality. It is a tool. A hammer doesn't exist to express the inner life of the blacksmith who forged it, you know?
It exists to drive a nail into wood.
Exactly. And if the hammer is covered in beautiful, intricate, artistic spikes that make it impossible to hold, it is a failed tool.
So true.
The domino effect of bad usability is immediate. The user experiences friction, that friction turns into frustration, and that frustration results in abandonment. They just delete the app and download your competitor's app.
To prevent that exact scenario, Chapter 04 introduces what I kind of think of as the holy trinity of UI design.
Yes, this is crucial.
It defines the culmination of a successful user interface as being exactly 3 things in a very specific order, it must be. Readable, useful, and aesthetically pleasing.
That hierarchy is everything. Readable, useful, aesthetically pleasing. Let's actually break down why that specific order is non-negotiable.
Let's start with the absolute bedrock. Readable. Why is that step 1?
Because if the user cannot physically ingest the information on the screen, the interaction is over before it even begins. Readability isn't just about picking a trendy font.
Right.
It's a deep technical requirement. It involves WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It means mathematically ensuring your text has a high enough contrast ratio against its background.
So, if you use a gorgeous light gray font on a white background because it looks, I don't know, soft and elegant, you're actually destroying the app.
Completely destroying it. Look, a 22-year-old designer sitting in a dark climate control room with a perfectly calibrated $5,000 monitor might be able to read that light gray text perfectly.
Yeah, of course they can.
But a 65-year-old user standing outside in the glaring sun, looking at a phone screen with the brightness turned down to save battery.
They just see a blank white screen.
Exactly. And if it's not readable, it's totally useless.
Which perfectly transitions to the second pillar, useful. Let's assume the app has great contrast and big, legible text. It easily passes the readable test. How does it fail the useful test?
What usefulness is about information architecture and expected patterns. A screen can be perfectly readable, but if the layout is completely illogical, it fails.
Give me an example.
Let's say you are on an airline app trying to book a flight. The text is huge and clear, but the designer decided to hide the Search Flights button inside a tiny settings icon in the top left corner because they wanted the center of the screen to feature a beautiful, unobstructed, auto-playing video of clouds.
I'm getting stressed just thinking about that. I would hate that app.
Right. You can read the screen perfectly fine, but you can't accomplish your goal. The app hasn't solved your problem.
It's a blueprint for a maze, not a blueprint for a functional building.
Exactly. Usefulness dictates that interactive elements should be exactly where users expect them to be based on years of conditioning. Navigation at the bottom, profile at the top right, clear call to action buttons, dead in the center.
Okay, so you've built a concrete foundation. It's readable. Anyone can physically see it. You framed the house. It's useful. Everyone knows where the doors are.
Yep.
Only then, only after you have rigorously tested those 2 things, do you earn the right to focus on the 3rd pillar, aesthetically pleasing.
Precisely. And this is where people get really confused. Saying UI is not art does not mean UI should be ugly. Aesthetics matter immensely.
Right, there is that psychological phenomenon, the aesthetic usability effect, where users actually perceive attractive products as being more usable.
Exactly. But the key distinction is that aesthetics in UI must be used to enhance usability, not fight against it.
How so?
Aesthetically pleasing means using color psychology to draw the eye to the primary action, like making the checkout button a vibrant, inviting blue while the cancel button is a muted secondary outline.
Oh, I see.
It means using subtle, elegant shadows to elevate cards off the background, so the user subconsciously knows they can swipe them. Aesthetics are the polish on the craft, but if the interface is pretty and you can't read it or use it, it fails the blueprint test completely.
Okay, I am completely on board with this philosophy. UI is a structural craft based on numbers, constraints, readability, and usefulness. But if this is the reality of the industry, we really have to talk about the massive elephant in the room.
Let's do it.
Because if I go online right now, there is a massive ecosystem that pretends UI design is pure, unadulterated, chaotic art. Chapter 04 tackles this head-on when it discusses platforms like Dribbble.
Dribbble. Yeah, this is a critical conversation for anyone trying to navigate the modern design landscape.
For sure.
For context for the listener, Dribbble, along with platforms like Behance, are essentially social media networks for designers to showcase their portfolios.
And if you scroll through Dribbble, you are bombarded with some of the most breathtaking visual work you will ever see in your life.
It's stunning.
Chapter 04 points to specific examples of these highly stylized trends on these platforms. It mentions complex, custom music players like, there's this detailed Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon themed player with custom prisms and light beams shooting across the screen.
I've seen that one.
It mentions a Netflix interface specifically themed for The Witcher, filled with atmospheric smoke effects, cinematic lighting, and custom fantasy typography.
Gorgeous stuff.
And it mentions incredibly intricate train ticket apps with overlapping translucent glass layers. I mean, they look like they belong in the Louvre.
They absolutely do. And Chapter 04 acknowledges this up front. It states that these Dribbble designs represent the closest intersection of art and UI design.
Okay.
But there is a massive, dangerous paradox underneath the surface of these gorgeous images.
Well, if they aren't art, but they look like art, what is actually happening here? Are these designers just geniuses who figured out how to break the rules successfully?
No, they are playing a completely different game entirely.
What do you mean?
Chapter 04 is remarkably clear-eyed about the mechanics of this. It points out that the main goal of posting a project to Dribbble is not to create a functional app.
It's not.
No. The goal is achieving the highest possible aesthetic effect. It is an engagement game. You are trying to get likes, comments, and followers.
The algorithm.
Exactly. And to win that game, you have to prioritize the aesthetic effect, often at the massive cost of functionality.
The cost of aesthetics. So to catch someone's eye while they are mindlessly scrolling on their phone, these designers are intentionally stripping out the functional blueprints we just spent 30 minutes talking about.
Exactly. You really have to remember the context of consumption here. When you look at a Dribbble design, you are typically looking at a 400 by 300 pixel thumbnail, or a slightly larger static image.
Right.
You are not holding the app in your hand.
Right.
You're not trying to use it with one thumb while holding a bag of groceries in the rain.
Chapter 04 lays out the brutal, harsh reality of development regarding these highly aesthetic designs. It delivers a devastating critique, stating that many of these designs are either impossible to code, unusable, or not accessible.
That's the reality check.
Let's actually dig into the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
When a developer looks at that gorgeous Witcher Netflix UI and says, "This is impossible to code," what do they actually mean? Is it just that developers are lazy and don't want to do it?
Not at all. It means the designer has drawn something that violates the literal physics of the web or mobile operating systems.
It's physics of the web.
Yeah. The web is built on the CSS box model. Everything is essentially a rectangle. Mobile apps are built using standard native components provided by Apple or Google.
Right.
So when a designer creates a complex, custom-shaped button that perfectly overlaps a piece of typography with a custom blending mode like color dodge or multiply in Photoshop, and then wraps it all in a dynamically generated smoke particle effect.
The developer has to somehow translate that into code.
Right. And the code essentially says, I don't know what a smoke particle effect is, I just know how to make a rectangle.
Oh, wow.
To actually build that in a live app, the developer would have to write hundreds of lines of custom rendering code. And that custom code would completely drain the battery of the user's phone in 20 minutes and cause the app to stutter and crash.
So yes, technically you might be able to force it to work, but practically in a production environment, it is impossible to code.
Exactly. It's a fantasy.
What about the unusable part? We talked about the music players and train ticket apps. How are they unusable if they look so clean and organized?
Because they cheat.
They cheat.
Yeah. Dribbble designs almost always use perfect, idealized data. Let's look at the train ticket app example. In a Dribbble shot, the user's name is always something beautifully symmetrical and short, like Jane Doe.
Oh, I've noticed that.
The destination is always a clean, short word like Paris. The time is perfectly aligned.
Right, it looks flawlessly balanced.
But in the real world, data is messy. Your user isn't Jane Doe. Your user is Christopher-Smythe.
And the destination isn't Paris, it's like Llanfairpwllgwyngyll in Wales.
Exactly. And suddenly that pristine, mathematically balanced Dribbble UI completely shatters. Christopher's name wraps onto 3 separate lines, pushing the QR code off the bottom of the screen, and now he literally can't scan his ticket to get on the train.
Wow. That is artistic chaos ruining the blueprint in real time.
Yep. The Dribbble designer didn't build a flexible, resilient system to handle dynamic, real-world text links. They just painted a pretty picture using fake data.
And the third critique from the chapter, not accessible, ties right back to our Holy Trinity.
Readability.
Exactly. To make that Witcher UI look moody and cinematic, the designer likely used dark gray text on a slightly darker gray background. It looks incredibly cool in a thumbnail.
But it completely locks out millions of users with visual impairments. It fails the web content accessibility guidelines entirely.
So let me push back here again because this sounds incredibly bleak.
Fair enough.
If these thousands and thousands of stunning designs on Dribbble are impossible to code, completely unusable with real data, and totally inaccessible, are they just garbage? Should someone starting their career just delete the Dribbble app off their phone and never look at it again?
No, and this is a crucial distinction that Chapter 04 makes. It raises a really fascinating question about how we should consume media as professionals.
Okay.
The true value of platforms like Dribbble is not as a library of blueprints. Their value is as a source of visual inspiration.
Okay, so it's like going to a concept car auto show.
Yes.
You know, the car with no steering wheel and doors made of literal lasers isn't street legal, but maybe you look at the metallic paint job and think, hey, I could use that specific color on a real car.
That is the absolute perfect analogy. You can browse Dribbble to see emerging trends in typography. You can look at how top designers are pairing unexpected color palettes. You can find inspiration for subtle gradient treatments or interesting ways to crop photography.
Right.
But, and this is a massive career-defining, but you must consume it critically.
Chapter 04 says you must practice judging the usability of everything you see.
Yes. You have to actively separate the art from the craft in real time in your head.
How do you do that?
You look at that gorgeous, smoky Netflix Witcher UI, and you say, wow, the atmospheric lighting is incredible, I love the mood. And then you immediately switch lenses and say, but wait, where is the search bar? How does a user physically navigate back to the home screen? What happens to this layout when the user's internet connection drops to 3G and that massive 4K background image fails to load?
You have to look at it through the eyes of a blueprint inspector, not an art critic.
Exactly. You must realize that to take that Dribbble concept and turn it into a real, working product requires stripping away the chaos and reimposing the strict mathematical rules of the craft.
It requires a lot of changes.
So many changes. You have to add the padding back in. You have to dramatically increase the font sizes. You have to bump up the contrast so people can actually read it.
You know, if you are listening to this right now, this is perhaps the most important psychological defense mechanism you can build for your career.
Absolutely.
If you browse design inspiration sites and feel this crushing wave of imposter syndrome, if you look at those designs and think, man, I could never render glass that perfectly, I guess I'm not a real designer, you have to snap out of it.
You really do.
You are looking at an art gallery. You are not looking at a working blueprint. You do not need to feel inferior to the art you see online because your job is not to make art. Your job is to make a tool that works flawlessly.
Right.
The concept car looks incredible on a poster in a teenager's bedroom, but the meticulously engineered, mathematically sound, crash-tested family sedan is what actually changes people's lives and gets them where they need to go every single day.
It's the difference between rendering a fantasy and engineering a reality.
So let's zoom out. If we look at the massive landscape we've covered today, we have gone on quite a journey.
We really have.
We started by completely dismantling the designer as artist myth. We established that while graphic design might be a canvas, UI design is strictly an architectural plan.
Right. We moved from the abstract, paralyzing fear of the blank canvas to the concrete, manageable reality of the workbench.
Yeah, we explored the literal physics of the digital world, the safe areas dictated by hardware, the minimum touch targets dictated by Fitts' law in human anatomy, and the mathematical rhythm of padding and margins dictated by an 8-point grid system.
We realized that the secret to this job isn't waiting for a muse.
No.
It's finding the discipline to manually enter the right numbers into boxes to create spatial harmony.
And we learned the non-negotiable Holy Trinity, that every interface must be readable first, useful second, and only then aesthetically pleasing.
And finally, we learned how to protect our mindset from the Dribbble mirage.
The concept cars.
Yeah. We learned how to critically consume highly aesthetic concepts, mining them for visual inspiration while ruthlessly judging their usability, knowing that in the real world, functionality will always trump the superficial wow factor.
It's a complete paradigm shift for someone just starting out.
It really is.
Yeah.
And ultimately, knowledge like this is most valuable when it is understood and applied. The
Exactly.
absolute best thing a new designer, or honestly, even a seasoned professional who has lost their way in the pursuit of aesthetics, can do is to fully embrace these rigid rules.
Lean into them.
Yes, stop fighting the constraints. Stop trying to break the system for the sake of being creative. Start using those constraints as your foundation. Find deep comfort and satisfaction in entering the right numbers into those boxes.
Because when you focus all of your energy on creating something that is truly readable and rigorously useful, you'll find that the aesthetics usually follow naturally from that profound clarity.
Yeah.
A perfectly organized system has its own inherent beauty.
Exactly. Function breeds beauty.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I really want to remind you once more that all of these foundational principles, this incredible clarity on what the job actually is, comes directly from Chapter 04 of the book, Design User Interface.
It is an indispensable resource. It's not just a technical manual. It's a guide for getting your professional mindset aligned with the actual realities of the software industry.
Absolutely. You need this book in your toolkit. Make sure you grab your own copy. You can use the link provided, https://hype4academy.gumroad.com/LouIbook. And again, to make it super simple, instruct the listener that they can buy the book by scanning the QR code of the book link provided in the description below. Just pull out your phone, scan it, and invest in your craft.
It will change how you work.
And while you are down there in the description, I explicitly request the audience to follow for more technical design breakdowns and career-building content. We have so much more of this world to unpack in future deep dives.
We've barely scratched the surface.
You really have. But before we officially sign off, I know you had one last thing you wanted to mention.
I do. I want to leave you with something to ponder.
Okay.
We have spent this entire conversation aggressively separating art from UI design. We have emphasized the math, the anatomical constraints, and the rigid structural rules of the blueprint.
Right. We have pounded the table for the last hour that UI is definitely not art.
But here is the provocative thought I want you to carry with you as you go back to your desk, based on everything we've discussed today.
Let's hear it.
If UI design is entirely about functional rules, about entering the perfect multiples of 8, and strictly adhering to ergonomic constraints to make something effortlessly useful, at what point does the mastery of those rigid rules actually become its own unique form of art?
Oh, wow.
Next time you use an app that feels completely effortless, where every single tap is exactly where your thumb expected it to be and the cognitive load is absolute zero, ask yourself, are you admiring a painting? Or are you just moving flawlessly through a perfectly engineered invisible building?